I realize that a lot of our economic system, has a lot of flaws, that a lot of problems with it, like wage labor that's not particularly pleasant, that, the rich have the big gap between like rich and poor. But I mean, it's together now because there's been like increasing standards of living in America, and isn't that in one way like a justification for it? But why it's still around? Why capitalism, from my understanding, has triumphed and it's still strong?
No, it's not. I don't think so. I mean, there was rising standards of living in slave societies. Slaves were much better off in the early 19th century than in the early 18th century. Is that an argument for slavery?
Well,
it's a terrible argument, I mean, any system, in fact, you could give that argument for Stalinism. There was very substantial economic growth in the Soviet Union. It's the second world, not the third. It was, until 1989, it was the second world, not the third world. Now it's back in the third world because it's undergoing capitalist reforms. Something you're not allowed to say, incidentally, but if you read, you'll notice. They've had 10 years of capitalist reforms which have driven them right back into the third world where they came from. Okay? But if you just look at it in terms of economic growth, it was reasonably successful. That's exactly what bothered Western leaders. If you read the documentary record, right up to the 1960s, where it sort of runs dry at the moment, you find that the great concern was that the Soviet Union was presenting itself as a model for modernization within a single generation. And that was raising all sorts of trouble, not only in the third world, but even in the rich countries. They didn't care about Russian aggression. What they cared about, or Stalin's terror or anything, it didn't bother anybody. Actually, the same is true of Cuba. The documents have just been released, and they're interesting, on Kennedy and the Kennedy administration in Cuba. And it's kind of interesting to see the way the facts are being hidden